This is Real Housewives of the Kingdom, a sweet space where you'll hear from the hearts of fellow housewives in the kingdom of God, some just like you and some really different in various walks of life. We will talk about how God is walking with us through the good and the hard. I pray you'll be encouraged and entertained as we laugh and sometimes cry together. Most of all, I hope it reminds you we're in this together and you are not alone. My guest today is my dear friend, Brooke Fuller. Brooke's husband, Zack, sustained a brain injury, which came on very sudden and unexpected. Zack lost the ability to walk and talk, among other usual life functions. They were both under 30 at the time, with a little girl who wasn't even 2 yet. We met their family at the brain injury rehab facility where my dad and Zack were roommates. While Zack has gained back some of his functions, life has changed very drastically for them. Brooke lives out her days beautifully, in both deep grief and overwhelming joy as it comes, and she's not afraid to say so. Her faith in Jesus runs deep and is evident in how she lives her life. She is still madly in love with Zack and the life they have built together, along with their now 3 little ladies. She is honest and raw about how it's been to walk out those marriage vows, in sickness and in health, at such a young age. Listen in and hear how God has sustained her. I believe you will be filled with hope and gain some perspective and wisdom on living with both joy and grief. I know you're going to love our conversation. Hello, everybody. I would like you to welcome my sweet friend, Brooke, to the show. We met the Fullers when my dad was actually in a car accident and had suffered a brain injury and was at a facility to get therapy, and Zack Fuller was his roommate. And so we met the Fullers, and Brooke is his wife. And so today we are chatting about that and just kind of the balance of just embracing joy and grief in life. So I'm going to let Brooke introduce herself and her family, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. My name is Brooke Fuller, and I am a wife, a Jesus follower, and a mom to 3 wonderful little girls, hashtag girl mom, named Charlie, who's 10, Juniper, who's 4, and Marigold, or Goldie, as we call her, who is 18 months. So life is full of love and laughter and fits and tears and lots of fun.
Well, we are going to dive into this discussion. Obviously, my experience with brain injury is, even though we met at the same brain injury facility, like, we're brain injuries, for anybody who doesn't know, are vastly different. Every single brain injury is different. So my dad's is very different from Zach's, even though they were roommates at the same facility. And Brooke and Zack are a little bit younger than me. And so that even that was such a different experience for them in their family, experiencing that. First, talk about how you met Zack, and about getting married and having Charlie, like the before brain injury stuff.
Okay, so we met, kind of met. I'm using air quotes for those of you who can't see, but we met at a youth camp, and he was a youth pastor who had brought his youth group there. I was a cabin leader. I was a new Christian. I was excited about, getting to know Jesus and walking with Jesus and serving and all that good stuff. So I was super excitable. And we were in our early 20s. And so he was organizing the games at the camp, and he was just totally adorable, totally a hunky Jesus guy. And
Love those hunky Jesus guys.
heck yeah. So I had my eye on him, way too scared to try and go talk to him, because I'm like the newbie girl, it was my first camp I had ever been to. He clearly knew everybody. He was everybody's friend, like walking around, Mr. Cool guy, and he's a PK, so he's been in that circle for his entire life. But so when we went home, I had a flyer where, since he was doing the games and serving at the camp, there's a little blurb about him on the flyer, and it had his, okay, I'm aging myself here, MySpace, MySpace handle. So I'm like, maybe I should just drop him a line. So I did, and we became MySpace pen pals, I guess you could say. And we would message each other literally 2 and 3 times a day. And he came down and took me on our first date. He lived in the Bay Area of California. I lived in the Central Valley. He drove 3.5 hours and did not spend the night. He came down, took me to dinner, and then drove back in the same day. And that was pretty much it after that. I think a couple weeks later, I went up and met his family and went to like a worship night that he had at his church. And he kind of had been like sort of distant, and I was really not wanting to play games, and like you'd be a cool friend and all, but I'm really not interested in just being friends. So I had prayed and said, God, if this guy does not like start pursuing me, then I'm out. Like I'm cutting it off. Like I'm not going to get a heartbreak here.
I'm in this for marriage. Like I want to find a partner for life. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I love friends too. I'm super friendly, but I wasn't interested in being his friend, a long distance friendship. This just wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to date him. And if he didn't want to date me, then I'm not wasting my time on some random dude from the Bay Area,
Yeah.
So at the same time, Zach was praying about me and asking God if he should pursue me. And God told Zach, you better hurry because she has her running shoes on.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So he was like, okay, all right, I'm on it. And then pretty much after that, he was calling me every day and, all that stuff. So, and then he asked me to be his girlfriend. And I think 9 months later, he asked me to marry him. So we had only known each other for 9 months when he proposed. And everybody was on board. My family, his family, everybody was like, yep, this is good. This is it. Even with just 9 months.
It's cliche, but I feel like when you know, and it's especially when you're intently looking and praying, like, Lord, bring the person that you have meant for me. And that's like a week into dating Kevin. He was like, hey, I'm in this for marriage if you're not, like, and I was like, nope, I'm right with you.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I love it. I know. No, we're not just messing around. Yeah. And my mom, the first time they met, we had gone out to ice cream. And my mom, after he left, my mom was like, you're marrying that guy. I was like, hey, now, zip it. Like, I was totally in denial because I didn't want to get my heart too, wrapped up in it. But anyway, so we were married for a couple years, and then we had our first daughter, Charlie, who is now 10. And then when she was about, we did ministry I moved up to the Bay Area with him after we got married. And then we both moved back down to Central California, and he got a job at my church that I had been at when we met. He was doing the youth there, and then shortly after they put him in charge of worship as well, and he was basically an associate pastor, so he was working full-time there and going to school, and I was a new teacher and a new mom, and we had just bought our first house. We had lived there, I think, for a little over a year, and then he got sick one day, and that's that.
How old was Charlie when he got sick? I mean, I know.
She was not quite a year and a half. So,
and
really
Charlie is
tiny.
Charlie is the same age as my oldest niece, and so so at the brain injury facility they played together and around the same age. So that
buddies.
was pretty, and that was also impactful, just like watching them both kind of with it. How many kids did you think you wanted when you got married?
4 plus. At least 4. Yeah, at least 4. four
Yeah.
or more. I wanted boys and girls. And yeah, we had our one little girl. And we were actually in the process of foster adopting. We had gone through the entire process and we're getting ready to home study and everything. And we're getting ready
Oh,
to
wow.
receive placements. And then he got sick. And I remember like talking to the adoption agency, the foster agency, and being like, you know, right now he's not feeling well right now. So right now
Mhm.
we better just put things on hold, and then we'll get
Wow.
back to this one day soon, in a few weeks when
Mhm.
everything's normal.
Better.
Yeah.
Now, so talk about what it was like at the beginning of his sickness, if you will, and what happened, and just talk about
How
that.
it happened. Okay. So Zach has a spontaneous brain injury. So whereas your dad, Rick, has a traumatic brain injury,
Hmm.
Zach's is spontaneous or acquired. He didn't have an accident or anything like that. He basically one day, I mean, we're talking vital, healthy, skateboarding, flips on the trampoline, like
Singing,
wild and
the guitar.
crazy, guitarist, like singer, like super just, in good shape, healthy, thin, like works out, all that,
Mhm.
all the stuff you like think of as being a healthy person.
Right.
We ate well, whatever. So he one day woke up when I was at work already, and it was on a Monday, so it was his like pastor day off, right?
Hmm.
And he was going to be with Charlie that day. He woke up and was like, I am so dizzy, I can't get out of bed.
Hmm.
I'm going to text Allison and call Allison and see if she can come get Charlie out of bed because I can't even get up. And I
Oh
was
my.
just like, holy cow, what's going on here, right? I mean, we went to bed the night before and he was fine.
Hmm.
And I had left early that morning, so I didn't see anybody when I, left. And so I ended up leaving work and coming home. And by that time, Allison had left and he had been able to get up. And he said the dizziness had subsided. So we ended up taking him in to just urgent care. And they were like, oh, it's probably just really bad allergies. Let's give you like a steroid shot and see, how that goes. And we're pretty holistically minded now.
Hmm.
We really weren't back then, but we weren't not, if that makes sense.
You weren't
We
not
weren't
healthy. You were just,
we
yeah.
just were very much like we didn't have a lot of medical experience. We weren't in the
Mhm.
medical system, so we were like, oh, doctor, yeah, I'm just gonna listen to these guys, they know what's up.
Right. Most people
um
under 30 don't. I feel like it's, you kind of learn a little bit as you
yeah,
go.
trial by fire. Like that was certainly it for us. So we just thought, oh, this doctor knows what they're talking about, like the doctor, right? So,
Mhm.
and no shade on the doctor, like they were doing the best they could.
Mhm.
But we went home. He had a decent couple of days, like where he was
Mhm.
still a little shaky, but he went to work. Whatever. We were getting ready for youth winter camp, and he was going to be leading worship with our youth group team,
Mhm.
worship team. And so he was getting ready for that, and we were teaching a class there for the youth camp. He and I both together, and so we were getting ready for that
Mhm.
and just busy, but he was functioning. He was fine, just a little off, but functioning. And then the day that we were leaving for camp, he woke up again and was really dizzy. And we were like,
Mhm.
okay, well, we kind of just waited around. I mean, we're talking like youth kids were in our living room hanging out. We were all just sort of waiting. Can he like get up? Can he get out of bed? Is he going to be okay?
Mhm.
And so finally he like mustered the ability to get up and he's like, I'm just going to make myself because then it'll go away, like it did the other day
Mhm.
and 2 days before or whatever. And then he did. We got up to camp. He was functioning. He was okay. He led worship that night with
Mhm.
the team and then went to bed, woke up the next day, and literally never was the same again after that.
Oh my
Never
God.
got better. It just got worse and worse and worse. He ended up staying for the entire camp, um, and just laid on the ground. Our friend Josh ended up leading worship with our youth team, and we took him back down the mountain and took him to ER, and they said, "Oh, it's probably vertigo,"
Mhm.
and they gave him an MRI. Um, No, not an MRI. That's the difference. They gave him a CT scan.
Okay.
So looking for like tumors or anything like that. So our little local hospital is just like a cute, precious little hospital, you know.
Mm.
And the doctor again, oh, it's probably vertigo. So we spent the next, to kind of zoom fast forward through the story because it's a little bit of a long story. We
Mm.
spent the next 2 weeks basically just watching him deteriorate. And we would go to the doctor. His doctor wanted him to come in twice a week, I think, just to check progress. And after about 2 weeks, the doctor was like, this is getting worse. This
Mhm.
is more than we have the ability to handle. I really think you need to get a second opinion. So, and I was like, okay, should we go to like, the next town up, like Fresno,
Mhm.
see, what they have? And he was like, no, I would go to UCSF or Stanford. So I tried to get him into UCF or Stanford just from a referral process. They looked at his CT scan and he had an MRI too, and actually nothing showed up later on. And we're talking, he's in a wheelchair at this point. His feet just slurred. He can't walk. He feels like he's on a raft. His eyes are shaking back and forth.
Oh my gosh.
The neurologist in town's like, oh, he maybe he had a stroke. Maybe he has MS. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like he was just sort of nonchalant about it, and I'm just sitting there like, whoa, these things
Great
like
bedside
are
manner.
right. These things are really serious, and I have a baby at home, and my life is ending as I know it before my eyes, and you're just, oh, probably MS, probably a stroke. So we ended up sending all of his scans and stuff to Stanford and UCSF. They were like, "Oh, we can get you in a month. Nothing. It doesn't look like this is a big deal, just by his scans because nothing was showing up." And we happened to be in for our like return checkup or whatever that his doctor wanted him to come back in for
Mhm.
when Stanford called. And our doctor goes, no, no. He's telling me this as I'm on the phone with Stanford. He's like, no, no, he needs to get in now. Give him my personal phone number and have that neurologist call me right now. So thank God our doctor advocated for us and
Yeah.
talked to the neurologist, and the neurologist said, okay, we can get him in a week, or he could go through the ER and, maybe they would expedite him and give him a bed. So when I got off the phone, we talked to the doctor about it, and the doctor said I would take him in literally today, go to the ER.
Wow.
So we did. We loaded up our stuff that night and went to the ER. And, like I said, at this point, he is totally like you can hardly understand him. His speech was so slurred. He was starting to say things that were kind of weird or off the wall, not make sense. Um, but yet he still knew everyone, knew everything. He recognized me. He knew what day it was. It
Which
wasn't.
makes
He
you
wasn't.
second guess.
It
Like
does.
you're
It
like,
does.
is it an emergency or am I dehydrated? Or is it,
Right.
or something
Is he
pushing on
malnourished
a
because
nerve?
he can't keep food down? Is he he's kind of goofy anyway. Like is he just
Mhm.
being goofy? Like it was hard to tell.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was really hard to tell. So we ended up going in. I think at that point we were pretty much like, I was definitely in a little bit of denial, but I think in really really sober moments, I knew that it was huge. I knew it was big. And so we ended up going in. The neurologist on call, they expedited him back. I mean, he was in triage, and then in triage, he did not wait 1 minute. They took him from triage to the
Mhm.
back, and he saw the neurologist on call.
Right.
Immediately, she asked him a bunch of questions, and she goes, wow, I think there's something wrong with your cerebellum. We were like, what? Okay. And so he did an MRI that night. She called me at 2 a.m. and said, yeah, his cerebellum's inflamed. It's swollen. We don't know why. We don't know how long it'll take to stop swelling. We don't know what the damage is going to be, but his cerebellum's swollen.
Mhm.
So that's how we got to a diagnosis, and I guess it's sort of a diagnosis, but yeah.
Mhm. That was the start of it. And was Charlie with your family, or did you have her there at the hospital with you?
She stayed with my sister in town, and my parents drove us up in their car, or I drove, and then my dad also drove. I drove one car, and my dad also drove. I followed him up, but my parents came with us, thankfully, and so did Zach's parents. Actually, came with us. They were down in visiting us and just helping with stuff because he, at that point, like I said, he was crawling to the bathroom and he was getting to where he couldn't even crawl.
Right.
He was couldn't keep anything down, just throwing everything up because he was so nauseous and dizzy all the time, and so
And
it
this
was
is like
really bad.
2 weeks at least,
Two
right?
weeks,
2 weeks.
2 weeks, 2 weeks from perfectly healthy, perfectly fine to literally cannot function.
It's crazy to me how they weren't quicker, like
Sooner, right?
sooner. I mean, it's in your mind, you think there's people who are hypochondriacal about like silly
Right.
little things. And I just think, oh my gosh, it's insane that he was not, that they were like, well, we could see him in a week when he's can't even get up to go to
Right.
the bathroom or
Right.
formulate words and things like
Words. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
insane.
Yeah, but his scans didn't look scary. I mean, it's all about the test, their test. But I mean, I could look at my husband and say like, he's not right, but because their test didn't show that he wasn't right, then it wasn't an emergency.
And was he all for going to the doctor? I know sometimes there's this cliche thing that men don't like.
Macho, yeah. No, we asked him if he wanted to go to Stanford that night or if he wanted to go in the morning, and he said he wanted to go right then.
Good.
So we went, and that's why we went, because it was
That's awesome.
his
That's
decision.
awesome. So the cerebellum was swelling, and then his diagnosis was Cattleman's. Is that correct?
No, it's Castleman's. But so after a bunch of tests and stuff, they're trying to figure out what was making it inflamed, because if they didn't figure that out, then they didn't know how to make it stop. But the consensus was that it was an autoimmune response. So basically, his immune system attacked his brain, and they think there's like, this is a totally new theory. He's the only person ever recorded for this to happen. Wow. They think, yeah, there's nobody else. He's a miracle, like a medical. I'm sorry, I meant to say he is a miracle, but he's a medical mystery.
Yeah, mystery and a miracle.
Both, yeah. He had there was a bunch of medical papers written on him, like scholarly articles and stuff. So anyway, the consensus was that the Castleman's disease, which was a tumor, very rare disease, a tumor in his chest, caused his immune system to go haywire and then attack his brain instead of attacking the Castleman's. So they took him in to do surgery and get that out to see that hopefully it would make the swelling stop. It wouldn't get worse. So.
And when did you know that he had suffered a brain injury that would be lasting?
Not in the beginning. No, I was definitely, like I said, in denial. Probably not until
like he was in the hospital, probably, and like, okay, well, like after we get this out, it's gonna he's gonna start feeling better, and
yeah. In my mind, it didn't really hit me. I mean, I think I knew it was going to be lasting because when they were talking about surgery, they talked about how it was really close to his vocal cords, and so that was something that was really concerning for me. Like, and they even said like this could really affect his speech and his voice and stuff. And so, like in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's never going to sing again, which he can't sing anymore. I mean, he can. He makes a joyful noise, but it's not the same. But it's not because of the surgery. It's because of the ataxia or the cerebellar swelling that caused those connections in his brain to disconnect. Anyway, so when he got discharged from Stanford, he was in Stanford for like 2 months, 3 months. He was in Stanford for a really long time because there were complications with his surgery. He actually almost died when they were taking the Castleman's out. He was just in very, very bad shape. He was skin and bones. He was making no sense at this point. I had a speech therapist tell me that he was gone, that he was out of his mind.
Oh my gosh.
He was just really not all there at all, and just slept all the time. Still couldn't keep anything down. So they discharged him after that, after they did the surgery, and um, sent him to rehab back home. And it was in rehab for me when it hit me like this is forever. Um, he had been there, I think, for a week, and the rehab liaison, I forget what her position was, but she was talking to me about things he would need when he went home. And it was very puzzling to me because I'm like, me, he's not going to need a wheelchair. He's not going to need a shower chair.
Yeah.
No, no, we don't need those. He's going to be
He's
fine.
young,
He's
like
going to walk. He's going to walk
yeah.
out of here. And needless to say, that was not the case. So that's probably when it hit me, was when the rehab gal was talking to me about, how this was going to be something he was going to have to keep um, doing therapy for the rest of his life.
I remember with my dad, even for us, they didn't really tell us he had a brain injury for a long time. I mean, it was after he had been out of the hospital and into an acute therapy. And then it was really just this nonchalant, like, oh yeah, TBI. And we were like, what is that? And they were like, traumatic brain injury. And we were like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, it's a lasting, like for the rest of his life. We don't think
Yep.
he's gonna walk again. And I was like, oh, because like with you as Zach, we felt like, oh, okay, like like he made it, he lived, like let's
Yep.
move on. And so, and then of course, any of us who've never experienced someone who had a brain injury, even as someone who has, like I said at the beginning, everyone's different. So
Yeah.
not really knowing what you're stepping into.
You can't know.
No.
It's nobody knows. Nobody knows how well someone's going to recover,
Right.
or how they're not going to recover.
Now, in the early days, like so after he's discharged, how how did you day to day parent, and how did you depend on God? What was your depend on God? How were you maybe frustrated at God? Like what were your like thoughts during that time?
I had a lot of support, as you tend to do at the beginning of a crisis, right? Everybody rallies. So that was so wonderful. Our church
Mhm.
community, our friends and family really stepped up. Um, I was able to, my job worked with me on being able to work half time. Um, and I was a teacher, so that was something that you just didn't do,
Mhm.
like they let me work a half day. And we had a lot of help and support. Um, it was hard. It was really, really hard trying to be present as a mom while grieving essentially the loss of my husband. You
Mhm.
know, he was he wasn't my husband. He was a shell. He was a shell, and you met him in those early days.
Mhm.
He's, thank God, so he's come really far.
Mhm.
But he was a shell when he came home, even still after being in therapy for so long, and seeing how his relationship with our daughter was non-existent.
Mhm.
He didn't, like, we would say I love you to him and he wouldn't even return it. Like, he was not in his right mind for a long time. Thankfully he is now, but those were really hard days.
When we were at CNS, I just, one of the things that always stuck out to me was how sweet you cultivated this love for him with Charlie, and just, calling him Daddo. And it was sweet because it was like you, even though you were uh, struggling and going through, grief and over it, what I saw was just this precious cultivation of this continual, we love Dado. We, like you just championed him and you championed her to champion him, and just continued to give her that honor and respect for him and dignity for him. And it like, I mean, it impacted me the first day I met you guys. It impacted me like incredibly. And for me, it was interesting because here I was with a dad in a brain injury facility as a almost 30-year-old woman, and I was watching this 1.5-year-old girl with a dad in a brain injury facility. And for me, I was like, like I felt like it was, and I remember telling God, I felt like it was unfair for her that, that she's this young and she's having to do this. But I just continued to watch, week in, week out when we would see you guys. And it was just so precious to me. And you like were such an encouragement. And I mean, it is incredible that you are your kid's mama, like, and Zach's wife. I mean, and to me, whether or not you were, and I know you were struggling, but you displayed like you could see that God's love was in you because you were moving forward during that time. Like that was like for me such a just, I don't know, just such a moment in my life of like, I mean, seriously, I think you're one of the most incredible people that I've ever known.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm humbled seriously by that. I am one of those folks that I'm like a take action kind of gal, And as you know, with brain injury, there's no action to take. You cannot do anything.
You can't force it.
You can't. You can't fix it. You cannot fix it. And I remember just thinking like maybe if I like hug him really tight and I just love him really like as deeply and as like intensely as I could, like that my love would make him better, and so we just loved the heck out of him and made him eat vegetables a lot and fruit. And poor guy, I pumped every supplement and weird like therapy on him for those first several years, and weird chiropractors and naturopaths and different like holistic therapies because like I said, I want to do something. What can I do, and so we did it all.
It's incredible because it's like God knew he needed you as a wife. Say it at as our wedding vows, in sickness and in health, but we don't fully comprehend what that could mean.
Oh man. I cannot tell you how many times I have flashed back to that day where we said those vows and how I had no freaking clue what I was saying when I said them. Now I do in hindsight, but I had no idea. You can never imagine going through something like this. You shouldn't have to imagine it. And we don't have the grace for it until we have to do it, until you have to do it. Grace comes through.
Absolutely. How long after he was discharged from Stanford did he go to CNS? And how did you find CNS and bring him there?
He went, so I believe it was the therapy facility, the local therapy facility that was like, oh, I think, he's young and like in otherwise good health. So he would really be a good candidate for this Bakersfield, like, cutting edge facility. And so that's how we were able to get him in. I think he was in the Visalia local therapy place for a couple of weeks only. It wasn't very long. And we visited and stuff in Bakersfield, CNS and Center for Mental Skills. And we were like, oh yeah, this is what he needs. So thankfully we were able to get him in there.
When they first came to my mom, I was actually mad at my mom at first because I was like, what? You want to send him away? This isn't going to be good. But then of course we saw what it was, the difference of the therapy, because he was getting good therapy, but not great therapy, not like what CNS did.
Probably 3 hours a day is probably maybe what he got, if that, maybe an hour and a half, 2
And he could
hours.
barely stay awake for that at that point.
Yeah, yeah, and then CNS, it was like, "Okay, you're going and you're gonna be doing therapy literally all day."
People who don't know, so CNS is the Center for Neuroskill in Bakersfield, California. They have other ones around the country. If you're looking for something like that, they're pretty incredible. So, like I said, Zach was my dad's roommate, and they literally lived in a situation where they would take them from, morning to night, your daily, on top of their therapy, it was their daily stuff: wake up, brush your teeth, go to the grocery store, just your everyday stuff. And actually, because people who have brain injuries often have to relearn absolutely everything.
He did have some confusion, but he always knew what day it was. He always knew who everybody was. He always knew what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
He never lost his ability to think, and he never lost that part of his brain. It was mostly physical,
Mm-hmm.
and emotional, definitely emotional stuff, which is interesting. Um, but yeah,
With CNS, now you lived in a motorhome, didn't you, close to CNS, so you could be
my
nearby?
parents brought their fifth wheel up to a camping
Mm-hmm.
facility there, and we stayed there in their fifth wheel while Zach was at CNS for that summer, just that one summer, because
Mm-hmm.
his brain injury happened in early March.
Mm-hmm.
He was at Stanford for a few months, and then by the time he got to CNS, it was the beginning of summer. So for the beginning of summer, he was inpatient at CNS, and we stayed there. He stayed at CNS, and we stayed in the trailer. We would just go see him and visit him all day, bring lunch, and watch his therapies and stuff. And then when school started, because I'm a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
I had to come back home and work, and Charlie and dogs, and so we came back home and just went up to see him on weekends for a few weeks until he then got discharged from the inpatient program and came home. And he would go a couple of days a week. My dad took him, and some other friends took him to Bakersfield to do outpatient stuff for a while too.
How's that starting work again? Because I mean, at the start of everything, you were kind of finishing your school year, and Zach also worked. So now you're starting a new school year with this not knowing kind of what the future is going to hold. How was that different, like starting the next year?
It was probably one of the loneliest seasons of my life. Having to go to work and show up emotionally for my students, interact normally with staff. For 6 months, I had been in brain injury world. I had been either with therapy people or doctors, nurses, and that was my world. So having to come out of that world and go into a quote normal world where I was expected to function like a normal human being, even though I was in a deep state of grief, was a trip. And it was very, very lonely. I remember I would break down, the bell rang at 7:56 and I'd be crying in my room at 7:30 a.m. And, the bell's ringing and tears are pouring down my face. And I'm just like, how can I do this? How can I show up for these people when my husband's in a whole other town 3 hours away, 2.5 hours away, and my life is crumbling, but yet I'm supposed to act. Hey, let's do 5-paragraph essay. Like, I don't give a crap about a 5-paragraph essay right now,
Yeah.
So it was really, really, really difficult. And I was just an emotional mess, really. I mean, but I did it. And through grace and with a lot of support from family and friends.
Did you feel like people responded to you well at that point? Because I mean, I know that, like you're saying, at the onslaught of something, everyone's sort of ready to like oh, we're here. We're like, we'll bring food. We'll, do whatever. Like, here's a gift card to
Right.
Target if you need anything.
Right.
But then as time wears on, I feel like people kind of feel like, okay, I'm kind of done hearing your story and want you to not, I don't want to like deal with you. Did you feel like you
Yes.
were still getting support at that point, or did you feel like it was starting to wane?
At that point, yes, I was still getting a lot of support. That probably didn't. That started the whole support waning thing. Probably started at about the year mark.
Mhm.
Um, about a year later is when people, you know, stopped coming around, stopped offering support, stopped offering help. I started feeling, like I was annoying people with my sadness, that sort of thing. But yeah, a lot of support in the very beginning and for really the first year. I am so grateful because I was emotionally like, there's part of me, I mean, looking back, it's so weird because it's like looking at a whole different life because our life is very different now. I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I did it. Part of me was in still a little bit of denial. And I think
Mhm.
this is the cool thing too about God
Mhm.
is that, excuse me, sorry,
Okay.
you're only revealed what you can handle. And
Mhm.
so as time wore on, it was like I was getting, my eyes were being uncovered a little bit more
Mhm.
to what our situation was really like, and was really going to be like,
Mhm.
um, because there's no way like it could have been just plopped on me all at once. I wouldn't have made it. I literally
Right.
think I could have died under the
Like at
just
the altar.
heaviness, the weight. Yeah.
At the altar, if God was like, okay, in a couple of years, you're gonna go through this, it would have
Right.
hit you, you'd say, no, I
Right.
can't do it.
Yeah. No. And even as we're going through it, as more things were revealed, a greater measure of grace is dealt.
Mhm.
And so, even though there were some really low times, it's sort of like evens out the scales are evened out,
Mhm.
deep
When I was
grief, deep grace.
when I was so when we had gotten the phone call about my dad's accident and we were driving to the hospital, and my sister had called me to say it was bad and we didn't know what was going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and I hung up the phone with her to call Kevin. Kevin was working, and I called Kevin, and as soon as I hung up the phone with Kevin, I felt this amazing amount of peace wash over me, and I felt like God said he's going to be okay, and I thought, oh, he's going to be okay. Okay, great. And so I called my sister back and I was like, sis, God gave me pizza. It's going to be okay. And she was like, no, sis, it's not going to be okay. And I was like, oh, really? And then Kevin got back home, picked me up, and we headed to the hospital. And on the way out, all of a sudden it occurred to me, I was like, wait, are you taking him to heaven? And that's why he's going to be okay. And then I was like, okay, wait a minute. What did
What
you,
does it's going to be okay mean? What
yeah.
does that mean?
Yep. And it was crazy because for us, it was like this one day at a time. We just looked for one small thing. There was a lot of big, heavy, hard things. And certain days there still is, but it's like, just one thing, if we could just hold on to one little good thing, even if it was, hey, he squeezed our hand today, or
Right.
he fluttered his eyes a little bit, we would just take that as hope. And obviously he didn't become the exact same man that he was before, but we do still
Mm-hmm.
have him. So, and it's like, I remember Kevin's cousin texted me while we were still at the hospital, and he said, praying, and his cousin had lost his wife to Huntington's disease the year
Mm-hmm.
prior, and they had two small girls. And so he had been through a lot of grief and was kind of dealing with a lot at the time too. And he had texted me saying, I'm praying for you guys as you find your new normal. And it was an interesting, I had never heard that phrase before, new
Mm-hmm.
normal.
Or even maybe realize that it applied to you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
New normal. No, no, no. We're going to go back to
We're
our old
gonna go,
normal in a
we're
few
gonna go
weeks.
back.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, as believers, you could have all the faith in the world, all the faith in the world, like, you know, and
Mhm.
but sometimes God's plan is for us to go through certain things and allow us to go through certain things. And it's we don't know why on this side of heaven, but it's hard because but I had faith that this wouldn't happen, and when we met you guys, I mean, I prayed so I still pray for you guys, but prayed for healing, for ultimate, like, I wanted him to just,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
just like one day back, and but obviously it wasn't God's plan. But I think
Right.
watching watching how you have dealt with the balance of grief and joy, and that's really, I feel like people aren't allowed to grieve, like I was talking about the waning of the support. And
Mhm.
I think as a society, even as a body of believers, even though the Bible talks about weeping with those who weep, I don't think we fully embrace mourning, and understand that you can live in grief and joy simultaneously.
Same
And
time.
I really think you do a beautiful, like, I think you live that beautifully. And I love that. I love seeing when you post and talk about your hard days, and you talk about your great days, and you talk about the good things, and you never have ever put Zach down. You've always honored him. You have shown so much love through that, and yet you embrace the grief and the joy. And I think people don't want to embrace grief.
No, no, we want to fix each other. We want
Mhm.
everything to be okay. So it's hard to be with someone who can't be fixed.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be fixed. You can't just fix this. It's
Mhm.
not going to go away. I literally live with my source of grief every single day.
Mhm.
He's literally with me in the home. My
And it's
husband,
and it's
my greatest love here on earth, and
Mhm.
also my biggest point of like grief and pain is his life and what's happened in his life. Both of those things. He is that he is like is an embodiment of that grief and that joy and goodness all in one. And it's just
Yeah.
not gonna it's not just gonna go away. And people
Mhm.
well meaning, but don't they don't want to. It's hard to sit with somebody who's in grief. It really is.
We have a family friend who lost a daughter, a little over a year ago, and she talks about how there's people who are like, "You're not better yet," kind of a thing.
Ugh,
I'm like,
so
"Oh
hard.
my gosh."
Never.
And again, I just really love how you don't have a problem sitting with the uncomfortable emotion of grief and saying it. Has it given you, is it helpful to talk about it? Do you feel like online, on the online space, or do you feel like that has been a double-edged sword?
It's definitely been a double-edged sword, and it has mostly been very helpful.
Mhm.
Um, I processing like writing,
Mhm.
so typing out my feelings and
Mhm.
you know the way that the things that I'm seeing and
Mhm.
understanding and learning through this process is helpful for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's also been people that just won't never understand, and
Mhm.
people that have also gone through deep grief that have handled their grief very differently than I
Mhm.
have, who don't understand, even though they've themselves gone through something super hard. So everybody's just so different, and I had to just really embrace my own journey.
Mhm.
And there were just these feelings and emotions that had to be felt. They just had to be, like, there was no keeping that in. So I really learned that if there were people who couldn't handle it, then that was fine.
Mhm.
That was okay. Some of those people were some of my best friends. It's hard.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. Everybody processes differently.
Yeah. Well, and that was like when my dad was in the hospital, and in one of his surgeries, I remember one of my sisters wanted to go, friends who were taking her to dinner, and he was in a surgery that was like not the life-saving surgery, but like rebuilding some major
Something.
part of his
Yeah.
body. And I remember I kind of got mad. I was like, I can't believe she's going to dinner with her friends. And my hubby was like, babe, everybody grieves different. And you need to just let your sister do that and it was so wise for him to tell me that. And I was like, oh, you're right. I'm like, for me, I want to like sit here in the hospital and like, not leave.
Yeah.
Totally. But she needed that. And that helped
An
her.
outlet. Yeah.
That was the first time I had seen or even heard when my husband encouraged me in that way. And I think it's so important to remember that and have grace for people.
Did some crazy stuff when I was in that space. I called the clinic that told us that he had the urgent care, that told us he had allergies. I called them and told them off. I mean, I didn't cuss at them or anything, but I was like, I just want you to know that my husband has a brain injury and it wasn't allergy. Like, I just needed to get mad at somebody, like I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Like, I can't believe I did that. Like, months later, I called them and like, I'm going to tell you what for, like I was just, like you said, like, and they were so gracious. I have to say, they were so gracious. The woman who I just talked to, whoever it was that answered the phone, God bless her. She, was probably just a receptionist, but, people do some crazy stuff when they are in that deep space of grief and pain. And we have to just understand that.
So when he came home from CNS, you were pretty much thinking now he continues with therapy even after CNS, because you said he went back up to CNS even when he was discharged to do some therapy.
He did the outpatient program for a little bit, and then it got a lot to, I think, to drive the 3 hours. It wasn't one way; it was just hour and a half one way, so hour and a half back. So it was just a lot to drive that every day, and then so it went down to like 3 days a week, and then I think he was going like 1 day a week, and then after a while he just started going back to the local therapy place, and then we also tried to do. I mean, like I would come home from work, and I'd be like, okay, get on the treadmill. All right, let's do this eye exercise. Like I was like his like coach, and Charlie was there, and poor thing, she watched a lot of screens during that season. So yeah, we were just doing whatever we could to try and get him better, get things better. And with brain injury, you're always told like there's a window, but I think that ideology is changing, that whatever you get back in the first year is what you're going to get back. Well, that's not true. Zach has gotten something back. I mean, I feel like it's so incremental that every single day he gets a little bit of something back still today after 8 years, Now, is it huge stuff like, oh, tomorrow he's going to get up and walk on his own? No. It's, like, oh, his coordination is just like, incrementally better or whatever. So he still to this day, he works out several times a week, and, life is a workout too. Like he just uses every opportunity, lifting babies above his head and playing with the girls and all those sorts of things are part of his daily life.
We kind of talked about the state he was in even at CNS, where, I mean, his speech was very slow, even though he always knew where he was and who he was and what had happened. His speech was slow, and he couldn't walk at CNS. So that meant, and he could use his arms, correct, or barely.
Everything worked. It's just there was no coordination or balance. So think of like, your tongue needs to be coordinated and your lips need to be coordinated to speak. So that's why his speech was slurred. His eyesight was bad because his eyes were no longer coordinated. So it's just balance and coordination.
Right.
So everything worked.
And I know that in talking to you, you had always wanted more children. And I remember I prayed so much for you to be able to have more babies. And it was so cool. I remember when my mom called me and was like, Brooke's pregnant. And I was like, what? That's amazing. And I'm so ecstatic. And I just want to talk about how old was Charlie when Juniper was born?
He was 5 when we got pregnant and 6 when she was born. Yeah, so Juniper's 4 now.
So I'll just say that her announcement for when they got to have the baby had her and Zach together, and it said, "Yep, it still works," which I thought was awesome because I'm sure some
Well,
people were like, "Oh, I'm sure you can't." Now, were you told that you probably wouldn't be able to, or
no, like I said, everything worked. It's just everything's uncoordinated.
yeah, that's okay. That's amazing.
Yeah, so it that was actually the announcement with Goldie, with our third. So with
Oh, okay. I'm getting it mixed up, I guess. Yeah.
that's okay. But with Juniper though, everybody was like, I think people were shocked. Like,
Yeah.
didn't know that was possible, you know?
Yeah.
And honestly, we had tried for maybe like, so a year before I got pregnant, we had been trying. Because I was sort of like, I want another baby. Like, things are really hard. He was still not in great shape, but I was sort of just like, I've always wanted more kids. If this is going to be our life, like, it's worth it to me, you know? We'll figure it out. And then I ended up actually having a miscarriage. So that point after the miscarriage, it was really devastating.
Yeah.
And it was a very early miscarriage, but it was still super devastating.
Yeah.
And I had pretty much said, I can't put my heart on the line anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I'm done. And then we had kept Charlie's crib and everything. And I had sold Charlie's, or not sold it. I gave it away to a friend who was adopting a little boy. I think like a few months later, I found out I got pregnant. So pretty much right after I literally released things, like all the baby stuff was gone. I found out I was pregnant, and we were sort of like, okay, alrighty. So yeah, definitely dream come true for sure. Our little rainbow
Incredible.
girl.
And Zach was on board for it 100% because you guys had always talked about having more than
he was shocked. He was shocked for sure. But it was like, yeah, this is what we're doing.
That's awesome. And then adding Goldie to the mix,
yes.
Just having another baby. And I think it's so sweet because I think there's so many people who are waiting for perfect time to start their family. So sweet to have watched you guys. You are going through such grief and hard times and difficulties, but it's like it doesn't matter. It's like, well, we're still making a family, and there's so much love in your family. And I think it's so cool because your girls are surrounded with so much love and seeing so much of life doesn't have to be perfect, but what's perfect is just like that togetherness and being together.
Yep, that's all that matters. That truly, we learned that the hard way, is that it's, and I say that, but I look back on our time. Really, it's a short time that we had before Zach's injury, and we didn't take it for granted either. Like, we had lots of fun together. We really enjoyed life and each other, and Charlie when she was, a baby. And so, yeah, but you definitely learn that to a greater measure after walking through something like this, for sure. I definitely adopted the whole like YOLO, like you literally only live once. And take the trip, do the drive. Whatever.
Spend the extra money, get the ice cream.
Exactly. Get the ice cream. Go up to the mountains for the day, even though, it's going to be a lot of work to pack all the kids and all the things and all the whatever. Like, do it. Just do it, because that's it. That's all we have. That's all we have.
And I think after going through something hard like that, where you nearly lose someone you love and lose a huge piece of them, and a dream of what you thought things might be like, I think you really do want to enjoy, because you've experienced life before things were different and difficult. I think if you don't enjoy those things, like then you won't, Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's cool.
Daddy's taking
Goldie. She could come in if she needs you.
Speak of the angel.
Having babies after, and what that was like in comparison, in terms, I know Zach is actually a huge help. But it is different in how he helps, obviously, than with Charlie.
Very, very different. Yeah. I think probably the second hardest thing after losing my marriage as I knew it, my husband as I knew it,
Mhm.
is how this has changed me as a parent. I'm
Mhm.
definitely not the parent that I thought I would be. Some
Mhm.
days I'm not the parent I want to be because I have my own crap
Mhm.
and I have a lot of it. I have a lot of my own stuff
Mhm.
that I am working through on a day to day basis of just the trauma of what
Mhm.
happened to our family. And so, parenting, as wildly beautiful and wonderful as it is really difficult
Mhm.
because I have my emotions. And then,
Mhm.
as we know, children are little teeny bags of emotions and they
Mhm.
reflect our emotions a lot of times. So it's been a trip learning how to parent through the grief and again, like relying on grace, and just how resilient the human spirit is,
Mhm.
and seeing that firsthand in my kids and how they are just so loving and
Mhm.
forgiving when mom's having a hard day or a hard moment, or when dad's having a hard day or a hard moment, and how unconditionally they
Mhm.
love us and are just happy to be with us and happy to be here and be doing life with us
Mhm.
is super humbling and beautiful and a reflection of the love of God and how amazing God made as human beings,
Our
So,
capacity and hearts, like, for
whew,
grief and love.
yeah, for life, just all the things of life, all the things of life, and grief is, and love and trauma and
Mhm.
heartache are very much a reality. It's just,
Mhm.
it's life.
If you could give, so if anyone's listening who has who is grieving something similar, different, how would you give any kind of advice or encouragement in terms of that living within grief and not being afraid to live in grief or and joy together?
There's things that I actually appreciate about what our experience has done for
Mhm.
me and my family and how it's changed me. And I would just say that, like, I now, after grief, have a greater capacity to see people,
Mhm.
to see my fellow human beings with love and compassion and understanding
Mhm.
that I absolutely did not have before. Our capacity to love and feel joy
Mhm.
and feel goodness is matched by our capacity to feel pain
Mhm.
and grief and hardship. So the more,
Mhm.
I've experienced a lot of pain and grief and
Mhm.
hardship, and that well is the same exact well that I feel love and joy and goodness and peace and comfort and wonder in. So it's matched, and
Incredible.
I
Wait.
am. It's hard. That's hard to hear. That's really
Mhm.
hard to hear. But there is no joy without mourning.
Mhm.
There is no peace without struggle. There is no beauty without hardship, and it's really hard to tell that to someone who's in the middle of deep grief. But it's definitely the silver lining.
Mhm.
Um, is that I look at the clouds differently now. I look at the
Mhm.
mountains differently now. I look at the birds differently now. I look at my husband differently. I look at the people walking by on the street differently, um, because of that capacity to feel the human experience
Mhm.
in a deeper way. I never would have had that if I didn't go through what I've gone through.
That's incredible. Like that is, and like you said, that might not be what people want to hear, but it's a beautiful comfort that dealing with that grief can be matched by that much joy. And that's amazing. What other, if you could say something to anybody who has a friend or family member who's dealing with a heavy grief, is there any advice you would give them on how to approach them or love them the best?
Don't leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
Don't leave them alone. Check in,
Mm-hmm.
even if they give you one-word answers, even if they don't want to talk. Just let them know. Just be there. Just be. You don't have to do anything. Just be. And then also, if you do want to do something, practical help, especially in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And shoot, for somebody like me who, my husband can't drive now. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
rely on people for stuff all the time. Just a practical offer of help, physical help. Hey, can I come mow your lawn? Hey, can I let me come do some dishes for you? Or don't even ask. Just say, like, what day this week would be good for me to bring you a meal? Phrase it like that, because it's really hard to receive when you feel like all you've been doing is receiving. That's what I would say. Just be, just love, just be.
I love that. So just to kind of also talk about, so where, if anybody's watching the video, you saw Zack kind of roll in a little bit on there on the corner. But he can walk, but mostly is in a wheelchair still.
His balance is really bad, so he has to have either a walker or he uses walking crutches, like they're called forearm crutches. But he really doesn't use them very often because he needs his arms to carry babies and wash dishes and do laundry and vacuum and and play with the dog and whatever.
Here, any other man listening, there's like literally no excuses for you.
Yep. True that.
And Zack's done some incredible things. You guys climbed a mountain. He works out his arms all the time. He carries babies, washes dishes, does a lot of things. And his speech is a little quicker now than it was.
Yeah, his eyesight is better. His speech is better. His balance is still really bad. He is way better. I mean, I think the biggest difference is that, like, when he had his first injury, he was basically a blob, just a blob of a human. He was non-functioning and couldn't really do anything. And now he is, like I said, washing dishes, doing laundry. We just got all the trim done in our new house, and we're still moving in, and he's every day doing
state move.
Yeah, we did. We just moved to Idaho from Central California, and he does caulking and measuring things and little fixes here and there, and so he makes a way. He figures out a way.
Incredible. Not exactly, not the same, but God definitely has healed even more since he came home, obviously, which is really cool. Well, we can kind of wrap up. I know your little Goldie girl is.
I know, precious baby. She woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
But yeah, I just loved this conversation. Thank you so much. And I just hope that everybody listening will just realize this thing of grief is not something that gets fixed, but something that God balances out with other joys. And it's so sweet to see. And I'm just so grateful that you shared your heart and your story with us. And I know that it's going to touch a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you for giving me the space to share. It's an honor to be heard and to be witnessed. Appreciate it.
And I always, my thing with this podcast is just that I want people to not feel alone. Like, I feel like as women, we can feel very alone in this world for a lot of different reasons. And I just want women to be able to share their stories and just remind each other that we're not alone and that we're all dealing with things, and it will help us if we can hear each other out and, be able to understand each other a little better too. So to end with rapid fire questions, what is your favorite vacation place you've been to?
North Idaho.
where you're
where
living.
I currently live.
That's
For
awesome.
sure. Yeah. It's
That's
the
awesome.
beauty up here is just unmatched. The people are amazing and wonderful and totally just welcoming and kind. And I told my husband when we first moved here, like, what the heck? These people are like on some good stuff because they're like the jolliest people that you like could meet. Like they're taking some happy pills because these people are just awesome.
Oh my gosh, the pictures you've been posting and videos, I'm just like, oh gosh, so beautiful. It's incredible. That's amazing that you moved to your favorite place. I love that. Do you have a favorite scripture or life verse?
Oh, I have a couple. Love the verse in Song of Solomon. I am my beloved's and he is mine. I think it's just a beautiful reminder. I have it tattooed on my arm actually, but I think it's a beautiful reminder. I'm going to get emo here, but just how we are God's, and there's nothing that is going to change that, or no one that can take that away. So I love that verse. And honestly, that's it. That's all we need, right?
Mm-hmm. To know that you belong to him.
Yep.
That is how you get through this crazy world and all the pain and heartache and the things that we deal with, is that we know that we're God's and that no one can snatch us from his hand.
Yep.
And then favorite TV show or movie?
Anything that has to do with homesteading. I am like totally like off the grid.
Little House on the Prairie.
I like reality TV.
Okay. Like people who have gone and homesteaded, not like
I know. Maybe I should get some tips from Little House on the Prairie. I don't know, but yeah. So like building off grid, Alaska, any shows about Alaska and homesteading in Alaska, having to, make your own way. I love that kind of stuff. I'm not doing that. I go to the grocery store and get my food, but it's like a twinkle in my eye, like a life that you like can't have but would love. Maybe
like a dream. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fun. I love it. Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I'm just grateful that you gave us the space, gave me the space to be able to share. It's beautiful that we get to hold each other and see each other. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm so honored to that you shared your story and that I can share it, because your story is so precious to me. And like I said, you're one of the most incredible women I've ever met in my life.
I love
and
your family. Your family is
daily.
Thank you.
So if anyone wants to reach out to you, you have an Instagram that they can, I can link it in the show notes, but you can tell people.
Yeah. It's, I'm a doula as well. Doula Instagram account is @TheVillageMother. So if you want to connect with me there, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. If you want to hear about anything with brain injury or marriage or homesteading or having babies, Brooke is your girl. Zack had written a blog post a little bit back about his experience. Do you think I could link that to the show notes?
Sure. He doesn't have very many posts. He didn't keep up with it, but he does have a few good posts. So yeah, for sure.
I thought it was really cool. One of the ones that I read, I just thought it was cool to hear from his perspective.
Totally. Yeah. But you can put it in there as well.
Yeah, I'll link that. Zack wrote just kind of a little bit about his experience. Hey, well, thank you so much for being on the show. I love you guys so much.
Yes. Love your family. You guys are such a blessing and just forever heart friends. So
yes, I feel like you guys are like family, like ever since, it's felt like we were just brought together under such hard circumstances, and it felt so nice. And it was so cool that we were both believers, our families, and that God did that. So it's incredible. Incredible. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay, all you housewives, that's it for today. I'm truly grateful you joined us. If you know anyone who would be encouraged by this episode, you can easily share it by taking a screenshot and adding it to your stories or feed. You can also text it to a friend. New episodes are uploaded every other Friday. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch them all. You can find and interact with me on Facebook and Instagram at Married Rogers Neighborhood, as well as my website, which I linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed our conversation today, it helps so much if you could take a second to rate and give a 5-star review. It really makes a huge difference for me and the podcast. Just remember, we are in this together. God loves you, and you are not alone. See you next time.